This can't be happening!
We'll fix this. Together.
Everyone heard her words loud and cutting, calling him a failure who couldn't provide. Humiliated in front of friends and family. He felt the world collapse around him, but what he did next would not only change his life, it would leave everyone who doubted him completely stunned. Daniel had spent weeks preparing for tonight. He had worked late nights, taken extra shifts, and saved every dollar he could, hoping to surprise his wife and show the family that he was doing his best. The house was filled with relatives, friends, and neighbors, all gathered to celebrate what should have been a happy evening. But the moment he tried to speak, Laura stepped forward. Her voice was sharp and loud, cutting through the chatter. "Daniel, you're a failure," she said, her eyes blazing. "You can't provide for this family. Everyone can see it." The room went silent. Daniel felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. He looked around, hoping someone would say something, but most of the guests only stared, uncomfortable and unsure what to do. Some whispered behind their hands. Others tried to smile politely. Heat rose to his face. Shame, anger, and disbelief collided inside him. He had worked so hard, and yet, in that moment, all his efforts seemed invisible. He wanted to respond, to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. The laughter of a few mocking relatives rang louder than the clapping from others. Daniel felt the humiliation, like a storm crushing him from all sides. After the gathering, Daniel went to the quiet of his small bedroom. The laughter and harsh words from the party still echoed in his mind. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His chest felt tight, and a heaviness pressed down on him that he couldn't shake. He replayed Laura's words over and over. A failure. Can't provide. The phrases burned like fire. Doubt crept into his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe all his late nights, sacrifices, and struggles had been for nothing. Maybe he really was failing his family. But then a small spark of defiance stirred inside him. Daniel remembered every early morning he had risen before the sun, every extra hour he had worked to make ends meet, every time he had put his family's needs above his own. No one had seen the effort. No one had noticed the quiet battles he fought every day. He clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "I won't let this define me." The humiliation still hurt, but it also lit something inside him. He realized he had two choices, give in to shame or rise above it. Daniel looked around his room, at the bills stacked on the desk and the worn tools he used to work hard every day. Everything reminded him of what he had endured and what he was capable of. He took a deep breath. "I will prove her wrong, not just to her, but to myself." And in that moment, Daniel made a silent promise. He would turn this humiliation into the fire that would change his life. The next morning, Daniel woke earlier than usual. The words from the party still lingered in his mind, but now they felt different, less like a blow and more like a challenge. He moved quietly around the house, thinking carefully about what he could do to prove himself, not just to Laura or the family, but to himself. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Money was tight, time was short, and he had already given everything he could. But this time, he decided to plan carefully. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, writing down goals, step by step. First, he would take on extra work. Then he would learn a new skill that could help him earn more. Finally, he would find a way to show the results, not with words, but with action. Every obstacle made the plan feel heavier, but also made him more determined. He imagined the faces at the party, the shocked silence, and the laughter he had endured. That memory no longer hurt him. It fueled him. Daniel knew he couldn't rush the process. He had to work quietly, carefully, and consistently. No one would notice at first, and that was fine. He wanted the results to speak for themselves. That evening, he looked at the notebook filled with notes, ideas, and schedules. A sense of purpose filled him. For the first time in months, he felt hope instead of shame. "This is my chance," he whispered. "I will not fail. I will show everyone, and most importantly myself, what I am capable of." With that resolve, Daniel began the first steps of a journey that would test his patience, courage, and heart, and eventually leave everyone stunned. Daniel started working quietly, long before anyone else woke up. He picked up extra shifts, helped neighbors with odd jobs, and studied online tutorials late into the night. Every hour was spent building something bigger than just money. He was building confidence, skill, and proof that he could provide for his family. No one noticed at first. Laura continued her criticism in passing, unaware of the silent transformation happening under her nose. Friends and relatives still assumed he was failing, dismissing him quietly. But Daniel didn't mind. He had learned that real change didn't need applause. It needed patience, persistence, and heart. Days turned into weeks, and small victories began to appear. He completed a project he had been avoiding for months. He earned his first extra paycheck from his side work. Each step brought a quiet thrill, a reminder that he was capable, even if the world didn't see it yet. Daniel's transformation was more than financial. He grew calmer, more confident, and stronger in his resolve. The shame that once crushed him began to fade. He walked taller, spoke with more certainty, and carried a quiet pride in his efforts. Every time he passed Laura, he resisted the urge to defend himself. Instead, he let his actions speak. He knew that one day, everything he had worked for would be visible, and when it was, there would be no need for words. The man who had been mocked, humiliated, and doubted was quietly becoming someone no one could ignore, and the suspense hung in the air. Would the world finally see the transformation Daniel had built in silence? Months later, Daniel arranged a small gathering at the community hall. It wasn't a party or celebration, at least not yet. It was an opportunity, his chance, to show the results of all the secret work he had done. The guests arrived, curious but unaware of what was coming. Laura was there, her usual sharp glance fixed on him, expecting nothing more than her familiar disappointment. When Daniel stepped forward, he carried a calm confidence that surprised everyone. His hands were steady, his posture proud. He began to speak, not with anger or bitterness, but with quiet determination. "I have been working hard," he said simply, "not to prove anything to anyone, but to prove to myself that I am capable." Then he revealed what he had accomplished. A successful small business plan, new skills that earned him a steady income, and evidence of the financial progress he had quietly built. Charts, receipts, and projects showed months of dedication. The room went silent. People who had doubted him whispered to each other, unsure if they had heard correctly. Laura's eyes widened, her words catching in her throat. The boy she had called a failure was now a man transformed. Daniel didn't boast. He let the work speak for itself. The results were undeniable. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers began to clap, some standing to show respect. The humiliation from before was replaced with astonishment and admiration. For the first time, Daniel felt fully seen not just by his wife, but by everyone who had ever doubted him. The quiet effort, the long nights, the hidden struggles had finally created a moment no one could ignore. Laura stood frozen, her face pale and eyes wide. The words she had spoken months ago, the ones that cut Daniel deeply, now seemed heavy on her own conscience. She finally understood that her harsh criticism had been wrong. The man she called a failure was standing before her, calm, strong, and accomplished. For the first time, she truly saw him, not the struggling, tired figure she had mocked, but the determined, capable man who had quietly worked to change his life. She swallowed, her voice trembling. I was wrong," she admitted softly. "I didn't see how hard you were working, how much effort you put in. I'm sorry, Daniel." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. He could have let anger rise, could have reminded her of the humiliation she caused. But instead, he smiled faintly, calm and composed. "It's not about proving you right or wrong," he said gently. "It's about believing in yourself, even when no one else does." The room was quiet, but the lesson was clear. Respect, recognition, and trust must be earned, and self-worth cannot depend on others' opinions. Laura nodded, tears forming as the crowd watched. Daniel had not only transformed his life, but had also taught everyone a powerful truth. Courage, patience, and quiet determination could turn humiliation into triumph. After that day, Daniel's life began to change in ways no one had expected. The humiliation he once felt was replaced by respect and admiration, not just from Laura, but from friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had witnessed his quiet perseverance. His success was proof that determination, patience, and belief in oneself could overcome doubt and criticism. Daniel continued his work, not for praise or recognition, but because he now knew the value of persistence and hard work. Laura, 2. Began to see the importance of support, patience, and understanding, learning that words can wound or uplift depending on how they are used. The story of Daniel's journey spread through the community. Children whispered about the man who turned failure into triumph. Adults reflected on their own judgments and realized that sometimes true strength is quiet and unseen until it's time to grow. Looking back, Daniel understood that the harsh words he had once heard were not the end. They were the spark that ignited his determination. He had faced doubt, criticism, and shame, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. In the end, his story reminded everyone that life can surprise us. Those we underestimate or even hurt may have the courage and persistence to astonish the world.